Hey, welcome back, guys. Tom Morkis here, and today I wanted to talk to you about virtual summits. Should you host a virtual summit? And we're going to get into the good, the bad, and the Nicolas Cage of virtual summits. So let's get to it. First and foremost, I want to make sure we're all on the same wavelength, kind of speaking the same language. So I wanted to quickly define virtual summits before we get into the pros and cons, just to make sure everybody knows what they are. So if you're not acquainted with the concept or term virtual summit, what it is basically a conference that's hosted online. And so sometimes I'll define it as a collaborative online event that features a series of expert interviews and is typically focused on one topic or area or niche. So you curate a bunch of potential guest experts, you interview them, and then that is effectively a virtual summit. And the way you profit from something like this is by selling tickets and sponsorship. Those are the two primary ways to profit or monetize a virtual summit. So here are just a couple examples. If you just search virtual summit, you'll see a ton of stuff out there. You'll probably see my article on the topic, tommorkis.com/virtual summit, and that's virtual-summit. That'll pop up probably on the top 10 of Google as well. But if you search a niche, you'll probably find something in that space if you're completely brand new to this. But these are just a few examples. And a special shout out to Skywalker, who is hosting the Wellness, Wealth, and Wisdom Virtual Summit. Amazing advice from the women of color experts. And Skywalker is a coaching client of mine, and I'm very excited to support her campaign. And I've been just really grateful to be able to help her along that way to get something like this out there. And the reason I wanted to spotlight this, it's going on live right now as you see this. Obviously, if you guys are watching a recording of this or it's older, it'll probably have been passed. But if you can check it out, check it out. And of course, support the things that you guys care about and that you want to see more of. But the reason I highlight this is because what's so cool is, this is one of the benefits that we'll get into. A virtual summit is just a great way to really kind of establish yourself in the niche that you want to be active in, okay? But these are a few examples. So we have Skywalkers with the Wellness, Wealth, and Wisdom Virtual Summit. We have the Bestseller Blueprint Virtual Summit. We have the Leading with Style Summit here. Lots of examples. Really, you search any niche for any kind of virtual summit, you'll probably find something out there for the most part. And so you can get a sense of what they are and what they're all about. So the question is, should you run a virtual summit or not? Is it going to end up being a good thing, a bad thing, or just an in-between thing? And that's really what we're here to talk about today. So which one is it? Like Nicolas Cage and like his films, there's a range. A virtual summit can be really, really positive and really good, or it can be negative. And I do know people who have had a bad experience running virtual summits, and we'll talk about both. So first, let's start with the good. Number one, the reason that you should run a virtual summit, or one of the main reasons, would be to make a profit on virtual tickets. So the reason that's a positive is because it's high margin, low overhead. So you're basically just selling a ticket to this virtual conference. So if you've already done all the interviews, when you're selling it, it's not a ton of work. That's the really nice part. And this will tie into another benefit that I'll talk a little bit about later. The nice part is you don't have to do a ton of work to get that up and running. It's you're interviewing people fundamentally. And so a virtual summit doesn't have to be more complex than that. But here's just a screenshot of one of my clients making over $20,000 a couple weeks into his campaign, and ended up with a lot more than that when everything was said and done. But that was on ticket sales alone. So again, you can see that it can quickly add up, and you can make a decent profit. 10, 20, 30,000 or more isn't a bad payday on the front end of a campaign that also has a number of other benefits associated with it. The second primary benefit when I'm talking to people about potentially running a virtual summit is, do you want to grow your email list? And if the answer is yes, then I think a virtual summit is a really good way to do it. Here's a snapshot of, the 1 or 2 week campaign for a virtual summit that I ran a little while ago called 100K Launch School. And as you can see, I was getting anywhere from, 300 to close to 900 subscribers a day from this thing while it was going on. And I think it ended up being over 5,000 subscribers from that, if I'm not mistaken. And I'd say those were pretty average results in a lot of ways. Like I didn't knock it out of the park. It's not like those are extreme numbers. This was a fairly simple virtual summit that I ran, and still ended up with about 5,000 subscribers. And again, I write about that in my blog post, tommorkis.com/virtual-summit. And I'll kind of break down how I did that and all the key elements to that. But again, virtual summit can be such a powerful way to grow your email list, because the people you're interviewing, the speakers, typically speaking, will share their event or their interview with their audiences, okay, or with their audience. And that's the real benefit of virtual summits in terms of growing your subscriber list, because you're going to be tapping into the networks and the followers and the readers and subscribers of the guests you are interviewing. And that's probably one of the best strategies to use for a virtual summit. So there's others, but again, if you do that, you will end up growing your email list, and ties into kind of like the profit on the virtual summit. The nice part is it doesn't require a ton of overhead to get started with something like this. Literally a registration page to your event, and you can be off to the races. So it doesn't even have to be that complex. So the nice part about a virtual summit is it's both something that you can monetize and makes money for you, but a bigger, I think, benefit is just the size of the list that you can grow from something like this. You can really build, a huge subscriber list and really grow your email list from a virtual summit if you do it right. Another big reason to do a virtual summit is to build relationships with strategic partners. And this is something that I think a lot of people think about secondarily. It's not necessarily the primary thing they think about. It's not the number one thing they're concerning themselves with. They're probably thinking more on the profit side with tickets or growing your email list. But I'll tell you what, the biggest thing that I think that people get out of running virtual summits, once they've done it, and once you have enough conversations with people who have done it, and I've hosted or run or advised on dozens and dozens of these virtual summits, and I can tell you it's what happens as a result of having all these interviews and connecting with so many great people in your niche or your space. You really do start to build relationships with those people you're interviewing. Not necessarily everybody, but you'll find that you will make a direct, immediate connection with the people you're interviewing. It's one of the great benefits even of having, let's say, a podcast or something like that. But it's really nice, especially if you're doing video, to be able to have a half an hour, hour-long conversation with someone to drill into something. And then the nature of it being collaborative, they're interviewing, they're being featured, they'll probably end up sharing it. Well, now you guys are working on kind of a business relationship capacity. So even if you're a new blogger or podcaster, you're thinking, oh, this would be good for my software company, or this would be good for my coaching consulting. And so I want to be able to connect with these people in the space that I'm in a positive way. That stuff can kind of compound and build over time too. So that's the beauty of it. It's like the relationship, you get something out for the virtual summit. Maybe it's profitable for both of you, which would be great. But ultimately it's like what will happen down the line as a result of now having this connection, this relationship, and where can you go from there? So it's all about, in my opinion, being collaborative and being supportive, and then you build up this awesome network of people that you can work with in your niche who have worked with you now, and so then when you come back to them for something, it's much easier to get a yes, to get a cross promotion, to get a share, to support one another, since you've now worked together on a campaign like this. So don't underestimate the power of building relationships and thinking about it in the context of kind of strategic partnerships, the people you would want to be working with in your space. That can be a huge asset to have, not only for the virtual summit that you're launching, but down the road. All right, the fourth reason that I think you should consider running a virtual summit is the influence and authority that you can generate from running a virtual summit. I have a couple of pictures here that shows Alexa Bigwarf. It's a story that I like to highlight again, another coaching client of mine. And you can check out her interview, or the interview I did with her on my podcast, where we kind of broke down what she did for this and how it all worked. Just go to tomworkis.com/podcast/Alexa-Bigwarf to check out that podcast. And it goes in a lot more depth if you're curious about it. But ultimately, just kind of the high level overview of this is by putting yourself in a position where you're the person hosting a virtual summit in your space, what happens? Okay, so now you're the person who's running. You're now known. You're associated with that topic, number one. So that's a great way to kind of grow your influence in a space. Okay, because it's Alexa Bigwarf who hosted the Women in Publishing Summit. So now they associate publishing and women in publishing with Alexa Bigwarf, and that's great. And she's done this 2 years in a row. It's gotten bigger each time. I think the third year is going to be, just enormous. And I think she'll continue to grow this and make it bigger and bigger. And that's the nice, kind of a subtle benefit of virtual summits, is that they will compound over time. If you commit to doing them every year, they only get bigger and better. If that's the direction you want to take with it, though I'm not saying you have to do them year after year. But the nice part is by doing it in the space, and let's say you do set it up with the intention of it being kind of an annual summit, the nice part is now you're the person who hosts that annual summit. So it doesn't matter what space you're in, whether it's, fitness, weight loss, keto, maybe you're in something like publishing, or maybe you're in marketing or business, or maybe you're in DIY, home improvement, or something self-help related. Well, if all of a sudden you're the person hosting that event, your name is now associated with that. So you get the influence that is associated with that, and the authority by having your name again as the host and being the person who interviews people who are experts or thought leaders, subject matter experts in your space. The power of that is just incredible, because now your face is next to all these great names and people in your space. This is especially helpful if you're just trying to get started. Like if you're just getting started and you don't have, let's say, all the clout, and say, if you don't have a lot of name recognition, there's a great way to advance that. And then if you are established, it's just another way to kind of cement in the minds of your readers, followers, and the marketplace itself that you're the guy or the girl to go to when it comes to this topic, because you're hosting it. and you're just crushing it that way with lots of interviews with great guests. And now you also become what Seth Godin calls an impresario, basically the person who kind of puts on an event. Well, now you're connected with all the people that you're bringing on board. So I mentioned that about building relationships, but just being the center point of something like this, connected to all these different people, there's added value to that down the road as well. But again, just growing your influence and your authority, it's a commonplace thing for somebody running a virtual summit. It's one of the fastest, best ways to do it, in my opinion, because it's hardest if you're going from scratch. If you're already established, there's definitely other ways you can do it, but some of your alternatives are just more long-winded. They take more time. If you're just getting started and you want to establish yourself as an authority and kind of grow your influence, again, a virtual summit can be a really great bet for you. And I've alluded to this a couple times, but ultimately what's really cool about a virtual summit is you can start from scratch. You can start from nothing and go from 0 to 60 pretty quickly. And I'd also say too, it's even more effective if you're already established. So it's not like this is a strategy just for people who are new. I think that would that diminishes the value of what a virtual summit is and how valuable it can be for your business by just saying it's only for people who are new. I think there's a lot of benefits to somebody who's kind of starting from scratch in a space, but I think virtual summits are typically even more profitable and more valuable for people who are more established in a space. And so, this is an example, snapshot of, again, a client of mine after the first week and a half, maybe 2 weeks of his campaign and breaking the $10,000 mark on the ticket sales, basically starting from scratch for him for the most part. And but then I look at the campaigns I've run with those who are more established, like the Teachable virtual summits, kind of multiple years in a row, were some of their highest grossing, just most profitable campaigns they ever ran, and really just helped spread the word about Teachable as a platform for people who want to host e-courses online. And again, the virtual summit, because they were already established platform, they were already doing well. This is a way to kind of advance that and position themselves in a very strong way. And again, they weren't trying to do this all from scratch. They were established, and so it was a profit accelerator, kind of a sales accelerator. And I think all these other things that I've already mentioned were just added benefits to running it for, again, a business or company that's already established. So if you're established, you already have things going for yourself really well. Even if you're getting the traffic that leads to sales, a virtual summit can be a great amplifier. But if you're getting started, I think a virtual summit can be a good way to kind of move into the scene and establish yourself fairly quickly in terms of, the amount of time and effort it takes relative to other ways that you could do it. All right, so now let's talk about the bad. And there are some things that can be bad about virtual summits. Number one is the risk. So there's a lot of work that goes into a virtual summit, and there's no guarantees. Like anything else you will do in life, any other kind of business or marketing campaign, nothing's a guarantee, right? Well, the same is true with virtual summits. I've showcased a bunch of examples that have been successful. I think a lot of people can be successful with these. I don't think they're the most complicated things to kind of put into place. And I've seen people who are not that technically advanced or not that, that savvy on the internet marketing, kind of game. But this still is a way for them to grow their database, their email subscribers, their email list, to grow sales on the front end and on the back end, and to just overall kind of grow their business. But it doesn't always happen, right? You might break even. You might even come out negative if people don't buy your tickets. If the job's done poorly, maybe, or if you're in a niche that you miscalculated and nobody's really interested in the topic, these things can happen. So number one is the bad. Again, I would almost say this is a neutral territory, but you got to consider it. Is the risk worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze to make it so that it's worth taking that risk? I think the answer is yes, because I think you can start a virtual summit for less than 10 grand to really just get something off. And I think most virtual summits I've seen have usually been able to perform about that on the front end usually, and then for sure on the back end. But that's just something you want to take into account. Like, is the risk worth it? The second bad part of a virtual summit is just that some niches are more saturated and the novelty is starting to wear off or is worn off. And probably probably in a lot of niches, I won't say most, the novelty has worn off on a virtual summit. Like if you'd done a virtual summit 3 to 5 years ago or something like that, and maybe even like a decade ago when they were called I think there's another name for them, something like digital conferences. So people have been doing this kind of thing for a long time. But in the last few years, they've been really, really powerful, and people just pick up on it, and in a new space, it just worked really well. It's like, oh, cool. I get all this. If I'm a potential customer in this topic, it's something I want to learn about. It's like, look, I get to learn from all these great people. It's free to attend. Okay, I'm in. If you've been in a space where people have run these multiple times, it's like any other kind of marketing campaign that you could run. The more other types of companies or businesses are doing the same thing, the more saturated it becomes, the less novel your thing is. And so if you're coming into a space that is more saturated, That's the potential downside, or again, it maybe increases your risk. Or the bad then with that is that are you going to stand out? Well, you may not stand out just as a direct result of the virtual summit. In this regard, if you're just hosting a virtual summit and they've already been done before, then that's not going to be the reason that people sign up and join, and that it's going to be profitable or useful. Well, you got to figure out other things, other reasons, other ways to do that. The virtual summit by itself alone will not be the critical factor here. Now, in some niches, that is the case. Like, you can still run a virtual summit in certain niches and topics that nobody's ever run yet, and then you get the novelty effect, and that's can be important. So I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but just know that some niches are more saturated, and if the novelty's worn out, then just like crowdfunding campaigns and stuff like that, they were really big in the first year or two, and you might jump on and support a crowdfunding campaign from a bunch of random people you didn't know. But now, as the novelty is worn off, you're not just going to jump in and support a campaign as a user for the most part. Maybe if it's tech or something like that. But if it's in the education space or software space or something like that, you're going to be more discerning. So that's the point with virtual summits too. Now, because they're more saturated, people are more discerning. So just because you run a virtual summit in a space doesn't mean that it will work. Obviously, the risk is there. And if it is super saturated, then the novelty isn't as impactful. It's not as useful. So you have to kind of rest on the value of the other things you're doing with the virtual summit to really use it as a tool to grow your business. Otherwise, if you're just putting it into a space where these kind of virtual summits have been done again and again, will it work? Who knows? I think the answer could be yes if you just do it right. But again, your numbers might not be as good as they could be if you were in a space that wasn't as saturated with virtual summits. And the last thing is just that putting your neck out there means that you can be criticized. And this is something that I haven't really spoken about a lot in the past, because I think part of me has just always assumed that is kind of taken for granted. But I think it's something that's important for you to understand, that can be a negative depending on if you're more of an introvert, if not, you're not used to kind of being in the limelight. Just understand that by hosting a virtual summit, but this is also by doing anything online, but a virtual summit for sure, because you can get a lot of traffic, you can get a lot of exposure very quickly, it can raise your profile very quickly. Just be aware that can then lead to criticism and people, haters, and haters gonna hate, man. And that does happen, and it's happened to even clients of mine. It's always saddens me when people get that kind of hate, because then they're like, oh, should I be doing it? Should I be doing this? Even when it's like 1 out of 100 is negative, and like there's at least 10 or 20 positive messages for every negative one. The negative ones, they hold more weight for us. We're human. So the negative stuff does impact us more. Even if all the stuff we're doing has gotten such positive rave reviews, you're still going to be susceptible to that criticism. So the bad is, if you don't have tough skin, or thick skin, that can be a tough thing to get through. So just remember that you will have to go through that. My recommendation, I don't want to get into it today and into this one, maybe I'll do another video on it later. You just got to be accepting of that and be able to weather the storm. But it is one of those things that could be a bad, kind of a negative, or a con when it comes to running a virtual summit. So just consider it. So virtual summits, good or bad, or somewhere in between, or which Nicolas Cage extreme is it? Well, the good is you can make a profit on virtual tickets, which are high margin and low overhead. You can grow your email list, which means you can make profit on the back end as well, selling higher ticket coaching, consulting, advisory, software services. And then, of course, you build relationships with strategic partners. You can grow your influence and authority, one of the best ways, I think, to do so. And you can do it all from scratch, starting from nothing. But even if you are established, then it can be a really effective accelerator. So those are all the reasons, that the pros, the good of running a virtual summit. And the bad or the cons here, the risk, it is lots of work and there's no guarantee, like anything else. So, is the juice worth the squeeze? The second thing is, some niches are more saturated and novelty is worn out, and that makes it sometimes harder to get people to opt in or to buy an all-access pass ticket, to buy a ticket to your virtual summit, especially if they've already seen a bunch of other virtual summits in your space. So you just want to be cognizant before you dive into doing something like this. You just be aware of the lay of the land. Look at what's already out there. If somebody's already done a virtual summit on the topic that you want to do one on, consider how you might reposition it, or maybe you niche down further. Those can be reasonable strategies. I'm not saying don't do it just because other people are doing virtual summits in your space, but do think about how do you niche down so you can differentiate yourself in a way that matters to the user and to the customer. And then finally, the bad thing, or one of the bads or cons, would be putting your neck out there means you can be criticized. Hey, this comes with the territory of writing and publishing online. You have a blog, a podcast, whatever. You're going to get haters. And the bigger you get, the more haters you will get. And when you do something like a virtual summit where you get thousands of new opt-ins and new subscribers, you get hundreds to thousands of new sales, guess what? Some people, a very small percentage, a very small minority, will hate on you and what you're doing. It doesn't matter why or what, all of it's irrelevant, but it will happen. And that 1 out of 100 will be sometimes tough to deal with. Maybe you'll get more than 1 out of 100. Maybe you'll get 2 out of 100. It doesn't matter. It still hurts. It's still something where you need the thick skin to kind of get through it. So again, if you don't want to be in the limelight, maybe this is not the right thing for you, because you kind of do have to put your name and your face out there to capitalize on a virtual summit. So if that's not for you, maybe find another strategy. So those are the good and bad of virtual summits. And where do I stand on this? Bottom line is that if no one else in your space has already hosted a virtual summit for X, for topic X, your niche, your topic, your genre, or whatever it might be, I think you should consider hosting a virtual summit to get your name associated with that space and on that, in that topic, like, so that you're that person. Okay, so Alexa Bigwarf is the host of the Women in Publishing Virtual Summit. That's fantastic. And, I didn't mention earlier that we had a screenshot of it. David McKnight, he's the host of the Leading with Style Virtual Summit. We have Skywalker, who hosted the Wellness, Wealth, and Wisdom, Amazing Advice from the Women of Color Virtual Summit. Okay, so these are ways that these individuals are positioning themselves and kind of establishing platforms and growing platforms with the specific niches that they're in. And now the thing is, there's tons of people who know them in this space now and doing what they're doing. So when people do watch, the users, the customers, they're going to now associate that name, that face, you, with that topic and that genre, that niche. So it's good. And repetition is critical to kind of growing your influence and your authority. It's just the repetition of seeing your face and your name out there. That helps a lot. So just seeing this in a virtual summit, having a lot of people share it, that's a lot of repetition to get that name and that face out there, right? So that's really, really powerful. So if you're the first one doing it in a space, I think it's absolutely worth the risk. I think, even though it is risk, I think it's worth the risk, because, hey, you have that ability to really be that first person on the scene. And the novelty effect is actually pretty powerful. It still works really well. I have had clients that have generated over 6 figures from virtual summits in the past 1 to 2 years. So this is not like it's not that profitable anymore. It can be very, very, very profitable. And I think the niches where it's most profitable are those where it's not as saturated. So if that's you, definitely consider running a virtual summit. And if you're established or you're in a space where it's more competitive, just consider how you could niche down or run maybe a more simple virtual summit. Virtual summits can get really complex. If you go to my article, it breaks it down step by step, and you can see how you can overlay a bunch of stuff on top of it to make it more complex in the hopes that it's bigger and more profitable. But if you just kind of want to test the waters with something, consider testing a virtual summit with maybe like 10 speakers or less, something like a mini virtual summit. I think you're going to start seeing more and more of those in the months and years to come. And they're going to get deeper into or more narrow niches is what you're going to see as well. That's my expectation. That's, if I was a gambling man, I would place money that you're going to start seeing stuff like that. But the point is, it's still not happening quite a lot. So learn how to put together a virtual summit, put together a very small one, and then you'll have the model and the framework to do it again and again and again. And you can keep doing these in smaller or more or different or narrow niches, right? So it's not like you have to keep getting smaller, but you could pick a narrow kind of niche, sub niche or a subgenre in the topic or space that you're in, and focus on that. So if you're in self-publishing, I've done campaigns where it's with fiction writers, virtual summit. Well, a niche of that might be the romance writers, virtual summit, right? You can see how you can kind of niche down, or it could be focused just on character development, story, plot, whatever. If you're in marketing, maybe it's Facebook advertising. Maybe it's actually specific to, Facebook Messenger bots. Maybe it's specific to Instagram stories, and whatever else is hot and growing right now. And just picking one of those topics, and you can host a virtual summit on it. So I think this is something that everybody should consider trying. And those are my 2 reasons for it. All right, so join the conversation here. Here's how you do it. Sign up for the newsletter at tomworkis.com/newsletter. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, tomworkis.com/YouTube. Sign up, subscribe, get the notification when I post new videos about weekly. And finally, leave a comment. Are you planning to run a virtual summit? Do you want to host a virtual summit? Why or why not? Yes or no, why or why not? Let me know. What's appealing to you? What do you not like? And what am I missing even in this video of things that you think I missed that would be actually a really big con that I didn't address, or a really big pro that I didn't address? This is surely not everything, but these were the main pros, the main good, and the main cons, the main bad that I could think of in my experience, having run dozens and dozens of these virtual summits in the past few years. But I want to hear from you. What do you think? So let me know. Are you planning to run a virtual summit? Why or why not? Share in the comments, okay? And other than that, thank you guys, and make sure to share this video with anybody you know who is running a virtual summit or considering it. Maybe this will help them decide whether it is worth the trouble and effort. All right, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.